Over the past year, we have been forced to live our lives in solitary hibernation. 2020, for most of us, has been a summerless year. We have forgotten what it means to breathe balmy air at a crowded beach or dance a tropical tune at a club. Instead, we relish sunshine through the windows, relying on screens to simulate the digital experience of warmth, creating an ambiguous and timeless existence that had been first idealized in 2009, when the cult of summer was worshipped for months as we sought to escape uncertainty with nostalgic music. We were all convinced we could continue being in the haze of summertime forever, but this was a fantasy, and as soon as we defined our relationship with it, it was over. This is the story of a movement we inhaled with gusto, only for it to evaporate, lost in the haze of a smoke cloud, leaving us wondering if it even existed at all, while becoming so entwined with modern music to become virtually unrecognizable and ever-changing. A movement that, disguised as a joke, changed forever how music is produced, distributed, evaluated, and performed, and how we can all return to a place of comfort that never existed through it, a space for angst we are expected to mitigate, somehow convincing ourselves and others that our feelings also never existed. In 2008, the financial crisis led to massive unemployment across the world. Graduating students were entering the workforce with crippling loans to pay off and little entry-level positions available. Raised in tolerance and comfort, believing they could become anything they wanted to be, young adults soon discovered they were superfluous in a collapsed economy that was incapable of absorbing them. They sought comfort by idealizing nostalgia through the words of parents that remembered fondly the 1960s and their sweeping social changes to bury their own insecurities of hazy internships and financial uncertainty. Three men found themselves in this predicament: accidental musicians Alan Palomo, Chaz Baer, and Ernest Green, and one mysterious writer, who all would find refuge from their physical confinements on the wonderful world of the internet. Over the last decades, the past has become instantly accessible on the internet. Cultural artifacts and icons long erased from our collective memory are revived, stripped of their context. New pieces of art are generated by the fuzz of memories and media being folded together, duplicated, sectioned off, blown up, and amplified, unifying signifiers of beautiful if esoteric meaning, which we call aesthetics. In the early 2010s, they were being shared in microblogging platforms, which used tags to filter content and help users navigate to media that made up their components. This new way of accessing these new constellations of media forms called for a stricter and more precise method of categorization and naming in a number of art fields which were part of internet subculture aesthetics, including music. Categorization of niche genres at this level brought about selective groups of artists, labels, bloggers, and fans to form tight-knit, fast-paced communities where new parts of the aesthetic were constantly being created, shared, and then repurposed. The speed at which music became the object of discussion led to fame and notoriety becoming vague and fleeting. Successful producers could disappear within days of skyrocketing frequently searched trending tags like the platforms they were using themselves. Undeveloped bands were hyped as contrarian bloggers indulged in the creation of illusory, small pond kinds of fame that were then discarded once novelty faded. Leftover genre tag names became digital epitaphs to stillborn movements. But during the inception of CHILLWAVE, something strange happened. Instead of being widely circulated and proliferated, the label was refuted by the key musicians behind it, and snubbed by the bloggers who were responsible for its success, who seemed to kill chillwave right after identifying it as a genre and part of an aesthetic.
We just constantly get called chillwave.
Oh, that's not even a real thing.
I couldn't help but wonder, why was chillwave ridiculed so quickly by those who had previously seen it as the future of music? Chillwave was first baptized by an enigmatic writer who went by the name of Carls on a pseudo-satirical music blog known as the Hipster Runoff. Carls had reviewed Alan Palomo's project, Neon Indian's Deadbeat Summer, in April of 2009, and on July 27 he compared Ernest Green's first release as Washed Out to Palomo, in which he attempted to figure out whether the budding genre was gaining real traction or just monetization potential through mainstream attention. The word chill was used to describe the attitude of these aloof musicians, a hallmark of sought-after authenticity from music critics. Chillness referred to a sense of mystery revolving around artists who embraced lusciously produced, conceptual, chill projects.
I guess a lot of artists at the time were doing stuff out their bedroom, and they're also, one-guy projects and all the similarities. So
detractors argued that it could have never been a proper trend because it was transparently manufactured, with other blatantly satirical name options including wave, post-electro, conceptro, and post-pitchfork core. Chillwave was recession-era music, low budget and danceable. The sound of escapism and resignation is glossy, tinkling little keyboard melodies, soft synth pads, and smeared guitar loops, a reaction to multiple financial recessions and the inability to avoid the horrific public events that the information age provided. But chillwave said precisely nothing about any of this. It ignored the system entirely through generational retreat, a collective desire to return to the womb, a place of contentment where we're left alone to exist in a sort of vaguely pleasant stasis. We might feel unhappy, but we don't want to burden others with those feelings, choosing instead to dream about better days, pinpointing a space between malaise and contentment, timeless innocence and brutal cynicism, the same cynicism that had tainted Carls's words. A product of circumstance that re-endorsed what seemed to be universal truths, that human nature can be inherently selfish and brutal. By creating a label from nothing, it revealed how arbitrary and meaningless tags really were.
That's their job, basically.
It wasn't a scene. It was the parody of a scene that cataloged a particular moment in time and the coming of age of its adherents. After all, every single chillwave band's sound could be described without using the actual word chillwave. The summer of 2009 was the culmination of lo-fi beach music tinged by a melancholy and longing that we can only understand when we realize it was made for people to stare at their laptops while dreaming of the beach instead of actually being there. Young men in isolation in the South searched for Brooklyn-like communities scattered across the United States, invariably and bizarrely stumbling upon stardom in the process. One of them was Ernest Green, who was forced to move back home with his parents after obtaining an advanced library science degree and being unable to find a job. Ernest began making music as a way of dealing with the weird feelings that accompanied that shift in his life, soaking brooding, harmonic 80s-inspired pop in the sticky colors of an old Polaroid, producing low-key warped pop music that is upbeat yet full of longing, prioritizing atmosphere over narrative. He slowed down the popular Italo-disco song, I Want You by Gary Lowe, to craft a summer's anthem, Feel It All Around, to combat his own shortcomings, using the music as a way to remind himself to remain positive, using sound to mirror his bittersweet feelings. He had met his friend and collaborator, Chaz Bear, at the University of South Carolina. Chaz is a graphic design major who was working at a bagel shop after graduation and also struggled to find employment. He produced music as a hobby and eventually released it after noticing the success of Washed Out's cassette tapes, which he distributed as a part of the 80s iconography and lo-fi production approach, with each handmade tape sounding slightly different when heard, despite being produced on a ubiquitous laptop. Chaz placed more emphasis on curiously mellow yelped vocals than the fuzzed guitars and synths, creating a skewed, sun-fried vibe of indie music with electronic elements. Meanwhile, in Texas, the son of a former musician, Alan Palomo, had been releasing his material for a few months under different project names. Struggling to produce music he was happy with, Alan scheduled a date to trip acid in hopes to find inspiration for his next set of tracks. But it fell through. As a way to apologize to his partner, he recorded the track, "Should Have Taken Acid With You." While studying filmmaking, he eventually found success as Neon Indian and was the first of the so-called Holy Trinity to release a full-length official album, Psychic Chasms. Alan produced 80s pop with oodles of reverb, upbeat tempos, and trippy psychedelic static that felt a little more colorful and kaleidoscopic, owing his biggest single to a Todd Rundgren sample of the track Is That Love, which he gravitated towards through following tactile and texture sounds, using memory like an instrument to select a psychedelic element, all about context, evoking places that he felt were visual. During the summer of Chill, Alan, Chaz, and Ernest's mixtapes, EPs, and records were being distributed at an unprecedented pace. They finished mixing songs on their computers, sent it to music blogs which would post them, and generate buzz within hours. Blogs and critics became more important than promoters, agents, managers, and A&R executives in dictating musical fate and marketing success. Recognition was clustered in niche communities, tucked away from the collective wave of mainstream attention that was the object of ridicule and contempt by so many authenticity championing independent musicians. With criticism and commentary becoming the dictators of success, perceived merit and authenticity became the metrics of success, as opposed to popularity and mass appeal. The aesthetic of Chillwave was described by Stuart Berman of the Dowsers as a virtual mood board of borrowed nostalgia for a half-remembered 80s with old-school rap beats, electro-synth bleeps, plush yacht rock, Balearic house, and 4AD dream pop all blurring together, like repurposed images in a rapidly scrolling Tumblr feed and mutating and fading like the resolution on an overused VHS tape. It was after the genre movement was first identified that artists began collaborating, remixing, and touring with each other, which ironically highlighted their stylistic and sonic differences while attempting to enforce and reconcile an imagined commonality. Washed Out's tracks were Balearic, slow, faded, and folksy. Neon Indian's music was more quirky, drawing from lo-fi and hypnagogic influences. Tori Moi rode out the chillwave because he produced bedroom pop with electronic elements but wanted to experiment with live instrumentation. In September 2009, Carls was growing tired of monotonous nostalgic music and he published another post on the hipster runoff. He claimed to be disappointed to discover most of the chillwave tracks that he liked because of their conceptual artistry behind their laid-back aesthetic were sample-based.
We put all this pressure on ourselves to only look within for ideas because we think that's the meaning of original. The truth is, nothing is original. Everything comes from something. It then becomes something that will now be derivative for future iterations. If nothing is original, then steal everything. And don't be ashamed.
Like many others, he was afraid of the genre gaining traction in the mainstream, something which was happening now that Washed Out had been profiled in the Rolling Stone, and big names like Demi Lovato and Kanye West were shouting out Neon Indian and Tori Moi. Numerous musicians began cropping up at the seams of the chillwave scene, inspired by the accessibility of the sound. Davy Hawk had been making music as memory tapes, memory cassette, and weird tapes for years, but was now being welcomed into the chillwave label, one that fit his analog and gritty, unexpected lax melodies. New York-based band Small Black gave listeners a more accessible version of this sound through their early lo-fi noise ballads of grainy, dancey, 1980s-inspired music. Night Jewel introduced faraway female vocals with lilting keyboards in their honeysuckle funk, shortly followed by Teen Girl Fantasy, Blackbird Blackbird, Million Young, Teen Days, and Blue Hawaii, amongst others. Chillwave was a reaction to loudly obnoxious late 2000s party anthems and rustic chamber pop new Americana indie folk alike. But by 2010, the prominent South by Southwest Music Festival had highlighted another major problem with chillwave: subpar live performances. Musicians relied on laptops to perform their music, and this was ridiculed by critics, who were unimpressed with the sound of clumsy synth music backing wobbly, reverb-drenched vocals, half-remembered top 40 songs and dance hits, sung by guys who seemed too shy to leave their rooms. While defenders of the genre insisted that the effect of nostalgic instrumentation with contemporary haziness was actually an honest and unpretentious approach to pop music making, indulgent instrumental breaks on live performances made the track seem repetitive and devoid of authenticity, and the discomfort of musicians seemed too idiosyncratic to be properly commercialized. Chillwave was music that was too slow to be danced to, yet made dancing seem fascinating. Poorer and poorer reviews in 2011 stacked up, hinting at tired tropes already explored to their fullest by chillwave predecessors, pushing Tor and Moi to make a bold shift to clattering disco and synth funk, Washed Out to release vaporously lush ambient pop, and Neon Indian to move on to glitchy stargazing electronic pop music in their new releases. Chillwave as a genre or movement slowed down to a crawl. It no longer meaningfully described any one sector of the indie scene because it became identical, in essence, to what most of its actors were producing. The mystery behind these musicians was vanishing as the genre convention of chillwave became adapted in mainstream music, like strong pop foundations with production motifs and samples from the late 80s, early 90s, a pulsating bass that surfs in and out, and the seamless rearrangement of all these pieces without sacrificing overall warmth and flow, becoming the norm. With music programs like FL Studio and GarageBand, along with an 808 and a synthesizer, anybody could experiment and make great down to mid-tempo music using barber pole phasers, sidechaining pumping drum machines, and even give R&B vocal styling a try, making the indie origin story virtually unrecognizable in chillwave. In 2013, the mysterious chillwave producer known as Clive Tanaka y su orquestra sued hip-hop star Nicki Minaj for apparently ripping off his track New Chicago. While boasting to be Argentinian and anonymous, it was actually a US resident with a Chicago mailing address who filed the paperwork for the suit. Chillwave music hadn't changed much in itself, but the world around it had changed, and it was now accommodating summertime imagery, analog production, and heavy sampling. Chillwave was one of the first genres to reflect the new pace of the indie music scene, cataloging a moment in time rather than one in space. Other dreamy genres in the past, like dream pop, ambient pop, and shoegaze, had also presented the narcotic nostalgia haze of their generation through sound. The desire to be chill and unaffected hinted at the reverse effect of these intentions. We spotlight our performative coldness and sprinkle sampled nostalgia over it to nurse and dilute the exact pain we are attempting to mask. But perhaps we all got tired of chilling around. With the speeding up of the internet, consuming chillwave in large doses as the soundtrack of digital beach aesthetics while feeling displaced in the time-constrained cruel reality of our rooms may have just gotten boring. Like its key protagonists, we might be annoyed at chillwave.
I don't know what a chillwave is, but I guess I'm apparently riding it. It used to be kind of bothersome because I guess, you know, people were sort of defining something for me or telling me what I sounded like, or just sort of assuming that anyone that might kind of sound like this, that their knowledge base or that their influences don't really exceed like 6 months before, you know, like, but yeah, I mean, if it helps you do that, then all the power to you, you know. It could be whatever, you know, construed it to be chillwave to begin with is totally not what it, you know, because I mean, yeah, like Tori, Moa, and Washed Out are really great. You know, I didn't meet him until after this whole sort of experience of being coupled together.
But in the long run, we know it's been a great thing after all. Before chillwave, blogs were judged by the relevance through which the musicians they praised were then successful outside of the internet in a symbiotic relationship. The internet blogs were good because the musicians were good, and these musicians were good because the internet blogs deemed them to be good. But with chillwave, there was a sense this process got out of hand.
Come on!
The blogs seemed to retaliate against their own authority.
By now we all know that chillwave is not real, the cake is a lie, the blogosphere was very young and reckless, we didn't know what we were doing. I'm sorry.
And musicians resented the latent power they now paraded, though the original parade itself was a joke.
I just thought, whatever, I don't know what they're talking about, but yeah.
Chillwave hadn't really died, but it went on to influence the 2010s as a vague notion, as a set of preferences, directions, and abstracted ideas that were reminiscent of the material its musicians were inspired by. Like indie rock, a genre with a similarly meaningless name, did in the 2000s, replacing guitar music with shiny synth pop. Chillwave went on to influence cloud rap and introduce us to music we connect with on a subconscious and spiritual level. We find shared comfort knowing we can all return to a place that never existed, through a music genre that never existed, a safe space for angst we are expected to mitigate, somehow convincing ourselves and others that our feelings also never existed in a world of uncertainty that feels all too real. Maybe now is the perfect time we can all chill again.